The Buddha was asked, what's the human experience about? And he said, well, each of us are like a drop of water in the ocean, and the ocean is God. So we're each just a drop, but we're important drops. If there's no drops, it wouldn't be much of an ocean. And he said that periodically, souls like to have an adventure. They like to learn, they like to grow. In other words, when we're in home base, heaven, the really real place, whatever you want to call it, yeah, it's easy to remember the big picture of life. But when we come to a place like Earth, that's when you can become a master. If you can remember here, let your light shine, remember who you are, why you're here, who walks beside you always, that's when you really develop. So the Buddha continued, periodically it's like a wave crashes against rocks. And if you've ever watched, the spray will go up in the air for a moment. Well, each of us is like a little one of those drops in the spray. And in that brief moment, that's like a human experience. So we go through all these, oh my God, I'm gonna die, I'm all alone, it's horrible. Why me, God? And then boom, right back in the ocean. And the nice thing is now quantum physicists agree very much with that description of reality.
My guest today is Mark Pitstick, who came into this human incarnation awake. And he since then has had a lot of pressure because he knew what he came in here to do. He has been proliferous in what he has produced in this world. 8 books, different audio programs, and he gives these things away for free. So for those of you who are in the comments and say, this person's just trying to sell something, it's not the case with my guest today. He's actually trying to create technology, and he's working with some pretty amazing people that would create a soul phone connection where you will eventually be able to have a text or a verbal conversation with your passed away loved one on the other side. So buckle up. This is going to be fascinating. Mark, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Lori. Thank you for what you do.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for acknowledging that. That means a lot. So it's not very often that I talk to somebody who came into this incarnation awake. So tell me what you remember, and maybe even if you remember planning this incarnation before you came here.
Well, the first evidence for that statement is when I was 6 years old, my parents were showing me a beautiful sunset, and I told them it reminded me of God. And they only told me that about 18 years later when I was in theology school. So as a young child, I do remember feeling like I didn't fit in when I saw the Robert Heinlein book, Stranger in a Strange Land. Like, that's it, that's how I feel. I kind of had to learn how to be an earthling. And so I quickly, easily slipped into meditation, yoga positions I discovered on my own when I was like 12. And so it was a process, but it was a very useful one, so that I could share things. So I understood. I mean, I grew up in the Midwest. I was just kind of a basic guy, Lutheran church. But it really took off when I was 19. I was in pre-med, Ohio State, started working in hospitals part-time as a respiratory therapist, and went through a whole lot of training. So I was involved in codes almost every shift. So with one or more people as their bodies were dying, important distinction there. I didn't say they were dying, I said their bodies were dying.
I love that you said that.
But the first hospital had a pediatric wing. So seeing that with the little children, seeing them suffer and pass, just brought me to my knees. I was not prepared for it. And that then motivated me to go to theology school, then clinical psychology, holistic healthcare, as a path to, and also search. I mean, is there really an afterlife? All those questions people wonder. I've searched for them for 50 years. I have a lot of great information and ways to help people awaken, heal their wounds, release limiting or wrong teachings of their youth. So the good news is everything's in place, and we really can have heaven on earth now, and we can turn our world around.
Wow. When you said to me, you help people release beliefs that aren't true from their childhood. What is the most common belief that you feel that people subscribe to that is not true from their childhood?
That they are separate from God. I had dinner with Evan Alexander, and we were talking about, people feel abandoned by their parents, by a loved one, and so on. He said, and I agree, he considers, and he had the week-long deep NDE, and he considers the root of the different abandonment feelings to be the mistaken teaching that we're separate from God.
Yeah, Evan Alexander's story resonated so deeply. I shared that book with so many people. I think I'd read Life After Life, and that was the only book I'd really ever read until his. And it was a game changer for a lot of people that I gave it to. And I feel blessed to have had him on the show because we didn't talk about his NDE. We talked about the wisdom that he's accumulated since then. I can't imagine, going through that and then giving up everything that you were before and just having a completely different life. But I think that that's one of the markers of people having a true experience, that everything about them changes. So when you were 19 and you kind of had that epiphany, what changed for you that was in your life before that point in time?
Well, before that, I mentioned Lutheran Church. So the teaching was God's all knowing, all loving, all powerful. And I envisioned God like most people back then, big guy in the sky, powerful, kind of orchestrating things. But at that moment, I realized that was all BS. It was wrong. If God were all loving and powerful and knowing, then why did little children die? And some of them abused to death. So I became an agnostic, an atheist. I threw everything out. And then that's when I started searching on my own. And then found out that the real news, what we call the great news in article number 19 at soulproof.com, that is how the universe is set up, the nature of reality. Dr. Gary Schwartz and I assembled this list based on clinical and scientific evidence in our book, Greater Reality Living. And the first item is no one really dies. The second one is you'll see your loved ones who pass on again, and you can communicate with them now. The third is we each are one with the one integral parts of source energy, creator. So not only are we not separate from God, we're part of that. And NDEs see that so clearly.
Yeah, you can't take you out of God. And I think that that's probably one of the most difficult concepts for people to grasp because of the programming that they've had from when they were born.
Yeah. Yeah, the Buddha did a really good job describing that. He said, he was asked, what's the human experience about? And he said, well, each of us are like a drop of water in the ocean, and the ocean is God. So we're each just a drop, but we're important drops. If there's no drops, it wouldn't be much of an ocean. And he said that periodically souls like to have an adventure. They like to learn. They like to grow. In other words, when we're in home base, heaven, the really real place, whatever you want to call it, yeah, it's easy to remember the big picture of life. But when we come to a place like Earth, that's when you can become a master. If you can remember here, let your light shine, remember who you are, why you're here, who walks beside you always, that's when you really develop. So the Buddha continued. So periodically, it's like a wave crashes against rocks. And if you've ever watched, the spray will go up in the air for a moment. Well, each of us is like a little one of those drops in the spray. And in that brief moment, that's like a human experience. So we go through all these, oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm all alone. It's horrible. Why me, God? And then boom, right back in the ocean. And the nice thing is now quantum physicists agree very much with that description of reality.
I love that you shared that. I've heard the drop of water many times, but I have never heard it as the wave crashing on the rock and spraying up. It makes so much sense. It's such an easy analogy to be able to understand.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. I'm curious, you mentioned a name that I really love. That was a big part of my spiritual awakening. And you said that you had your spiritual awakening and you began searching on your own. Will you share who was the first thing, the first person that maybe you came across, you read, the first information that you went, wait a minute, atheism may not be the right choice in what's happening here?
Yeah, I would say four. So this is 1975 now.
Okay.
Um, I'm very young, and uh, so first would be Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda.
So many people say that one.
I just opened it up, and the first paragraph says, "My first memories as a child were of a distant life in the Himalayas where I was a yogic teacher." I'm like, well, that's pretty heavy. The next, Ram Dass, his book, Be Here Now. You've probably heard that one. Raymond Moody, you mentioned his book, Life After Life. That was really important because, like, wow, there's a real doctor saying, because at
Right.
that point, I had thrown everything, I was going to find out for myself. So to have a medical doctor and a PhD say, hey, here's some clinical evidence that it really does exist. Those are the big three. I was reading a lot of Kubler-Ross back then, her work on death and dying. So yeah, I give a lot of credit to them.
The name that I heard you say that caught my attention was Michael Newton.
Yeah, well, Michael came on later. His first book, Journey of Souls, didn't come out till 1994. And I interviewed him, by the way. People can listen to the interview.
I'm so jealous.
It's free. Soulproof.com/radio shows what a gentle, loving genius. His Life Between Lives work is such a treasure house of information about the big picture of life.
I feel like his books are almost like a living book. You can go back and you can read it and you'll pick up things you didn't pick up when you were reading them before, because we evolve and we change and we get new information and we're able to understand things that maybe the first time we glossed over it didn't make sense.
And he did that research for 15 to 20 years and accumulated thousands of cases before he shared it with anyone, because he wanted to make sure he had a real um, clinical collection of data there before he shared it. So, yeah, amazing person.
You also mentioned Dr. Brian Weiss, who was a big one for me because that past life regression really made a lot of sense, especially anything that you can find pieces of evidential information. And I think that that's why I really enjoy listening to people who have had past lives that were uncovered as children, because often they do have names and towns that are verifiable. And I think now, Eben Alexander said this on my show. He said there is a mountain of evidence for past lives. It's not even a question anymore of if they existed, because there's too much evidence to say that they didn't.
Yeah, I agree totally. And my article about past life regressions is 102. I spent a week with Dr. Weiss in 1998 learning to do past life regressions. And I know one thing he shared that really filled in a piece of the puzzle for me was he said, most humans want life to be easy, comfortable, and safe. He said souls could care less about any of that.
I
They
love that.
they want to grow. They want to learn. They want to have adventures. And I said, boy, that explains a lot of things. And so he said, people who have an easy life, although I've never met one, he said that's considered a rest incarnation. It's kind of like taking a vacation on Earth. Um, but most people come here, to work, to learn, to grow, to serve, to love.
I think that is fabulous. I'm so glad that you shared that. I know that I feel like we're the daredevil souls, and I didn't interview this person who had this experience, but there was somebody who had died in an accident. And in her explanation with her spirit guide, they looked at her body that was mangled from this accident. And then they laughed at the idea of making her blind, making the arm stay, missing, and having to have a prosthetic, like making her have a brain injury was hilarious. Like from the soul perspective, that all makes sense. But from the human perspective, we're like, I'm not even coming back. That's
Right,
what most
right.
people say. This is my last incarnation. I'm not coming back, but I don't think that that's true.
Yeah, another teacher who helped me so much was Joseph Campbell, and he wrote about
Ah,
the hero's journey and pointing out that one reason humans like so much movies, books, plays about heroes and heroines, adventures, is that's what we are as souls. That's why we come here. But of course, then the silly old spiritual amnesia kicks in. We forget the big picture, and it can be a little scary until we awaken a bit, learn some important information, have some firsthand experiences, and then you can relax. And like Jesus said, no, there's nothing to fear. And you can see with eyes that really see, hear with ears that really hear. And you know it's all good, it's all God.
wow. Tell me a little bit about the past life regression. It's an area I've always been fascinated by. I've had a past life regression before. It was very powerful for me, but I think that there are a lot of people that are skeptical about it. So what would you say to those people since you've been trained how to, how to do it and you've done a lot of sessions?
Yeah, well, first of all, as you say, there are some cases for which we have validation, evidential evidence. So we know for a fact that some of them are real. Dr. Dr. Brian Weiss emphasized that in a sense, as far as healing, it doesn't matter though whether that other space-time experience really happened or whether it's a metaphor. It's the change, it's a shift in your energy, it's a releasing fear, it's awakening to the big picture of life more. Next thing I'd say about that is um, the model of past lives. I prefer the term cyclical life experiences because, as you know, time's largely a human construct. And so
Right.
to say, oh, this is past, you know, in 1400s I was a Viking, 1500s I was a pioneer, that's pretty constricting. So I look at it, and Dr. Schwartz does as well. The most clear understanding of reality is that we are beings of energy, info energy, light, consciousness, and periodically we like to watch a virtual reality show. We like to have a virtual reality experience. So we come down to Earth. It's really a blink of an eye, but it could seem like 100 years. And then that's what those quote past lives are about. We're selecting something that our soul visited, or maybe even somebody else did. It's like checking out a book in the Akashic Library. The last thing I would say about past life regression is that people can experience it. That's one of my free audio programs. The first track's about 15 minutes of me explaining all this, and then next a 45-minute, hour-long deep induction so you can explore other slices of life. And this gets into string theory, um, and looking at life as little cross sections. I can imagine a cross section of a basketball, and that's just one of many, many experiences we have as forever beings.
And I think it makes a lot of sense because I think we can relate to it from a human aspect. We've created things like amusement parks or haunted houses because when we go to those places, we get immersed in them and they elicit some type of a response. So maybe it's an adrenaline response, or maybe we lose ourselves in that moment and that's all we're experiencing. Or you go to an amazing movie where you forget that you're watching the movie, you just feel like you're in it. And I
Mhm.
think that for a soul, the more real it feels, probably the more exciting it is. And I think that that's the best example of a human life experience compared to why a soul would want to come and have an experience here. So will you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, Dr. Weiss, again, another thing he said that really stuck out. He said, people are so afraid of death. He said, from everything I know and have learned over the decades, Earth is the toilet bowl of the universe. He said, this is like the worst place you can be. So he said, first of all, if you're afraid of dying, just realize where you're going after your earthly body dies. It's about 1,000,000 times better than this. But we choose it knowing there is going to be the density and the cruelty and the ignorance and so on, because, as you say, that gives us the background for really growing. It's like lifting weights. If I were to uh, press this pen 10 times, I wouldn't get much muscle growth. But if I use a dumbbell, I get more. Well, it's the same way with spiritual struggles, and different cultures have recognized that. Native Americans, for example, we I produced a documentary, and this is also free on the website, soulproof.com/shop. It's called Soul Proof. So it's a 90-minute documentary film. And one of our guests was a Native American teacher. And he said, from our tradition, when we see someone who's gone through a tough time, say they're paralyzed, we don't have pity for them. We don't feel sorry for them. We honor them. We recognize we're in the presence of a great soul who was strong enough, had enough strength of spirit to come here and overcome this and show others what is possible in the human condition.
You're just about ready to make me cry. I don't think I've really shared this on my show before, but my dad has a slow progressing form of Lou Gehrig's disease. So he was a stage 3 bicycle racer at one point in his life. He could bench press 600 pounds with his legs. He was strong. And he has now been reduced to the place where he can lift himself up and pivot. He cannot take a single step. He would collapse. So he's in a motorized wheelchair. And Mark, I've never heard him complain about this. If it were me, I would be complaining a lot. I know I would. I mean, I feel like I have a good outlook on life, but if you ask him why he doesn't complain about it, he said somebody else always has it worse. And I want to take what you just said and I want to play that for him, because I think that there is something so beautiful in knowing that the people that we love, that we see as struggling, if we could change that perspective and look at them instead of with pity, but with reverence for what they took on a soul level, like, wow, that changes things.
Lori, how long ago was he diagnosed?
About 26 years ago. He has a thing called progressive muscle atrophy.
Okay. Well, it might be too late for him then. But a lot of those musculoskeletal diseases, neuromuscular disorders, whether it's Parkinson's, ALS, multiple sclerosis, actually, if it's a mild or moderate case, it can be reversed. But if it's too severe and too chronic, then it can't. I would just mention the website for people who want to get well again, and it's well, if they, my book, Radiant Wellness, which is one of the books, which is free, Radiant Wellness, it describes all this, but it's nutritional healing. For example, I used a technique called nutrition response testing. There's another, applied kinesiology, but uses muscle testing to find out what is the brain. See, the brain today is assaulted by heavy metals, chemicals, lack of nutrition, too many fake vaccines, etc. And that's one reason so many kids are passing by suicide. Number 2 cause of death, ages 15 through 35. That's one reason for the plethora of neuromuscular disorders, etc. So again, oftentimes those can be addressed. Radiant Wellness, you can learn so much and hopefully turn some of these around.
I think that a lot of things in the future with healing will be around frequency, vibration, light. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, yeah, eventually, but sometimes you need the building blocks. I mean, I use all those things for myself for healing, but organs, most people don't realize each organ has certain nutrients it needs, like zinc and manganese and so on. Well, if they don't have those, then it can't work right. And so it's important to get rid of the bad things, which I mentioned some, and then give the body the good things it needs. And then the organs can heal themselves in many cases. I mean, we've had type 1 diabetes reversed. So the body is so much more self-healing and restorative than most people can imagine. And again, that's an expression of our true nature.
Yeah, so many people who go on the other side come back and they were shown what they could heal, or they saw their body healing itself from the perspective of their higher self influencing on it while they were on the other side. It is incredible. And I think that this is why all the pharmaceutical drugs have to overcome what? The placebo effect. And it's become more and more difficult for some of these drugs to overcome that, because I think we're getting more powerful in our thoughts. We're understanding that we have an influence over them. And then when we have a belief and we see other people doing it, then it just gets stronger for everybody else.
Well, everyone's unique, Lori, and so that's the beauty of holistic healthcare, and I talk about that a lot in my book and why it's good to have an integrative health team, acupuncturist, deep tissue massage, chiropractor, nutritional healer, and then an integrative medical doctor. And when you have those five, they communicate and work together because for some people, they need the physical intervention, for other mental, then emotional, and then spiritual / energetic. So in the future, caregivers will be able to triage and find out, okay, this person needs this and this, versus right now, poor people have to shop around and hopefully stumble into the person that can identify their problem and help them. We can do a lot better than that.
I love that you're sharing all this information. This is so helpful. Oh my goodness. You're just throwing the gold nuggets all over the place today. So one of the areas that I am most curious about what you're doing is the work with Dr. Gary Schwartz on this soul phone. So you mentioned that there are 3 parts to it, each build on it. So will you explain what this project is and why did you start this?
Sure. Well, Dr. Schwartz and I met 9 years ago. We were involved in the group Eternia, which Dr. Eben Alexander started, along with John Audette. Raymond Moody was the chairperson, and it's that same crowd like we are talking about. And Dr. Schwartz and I really hit off. We could see we're kindred spirits, and he invited me to be the spokesperson for the Soul Phone Project. He recently retired from the University of Arizona. For people who don't know him, he's a former Harvard and Yale professor. He had 2 NDEs as a child. He's a certifiable genius. This guy's amazing. So as I mentioned, the goal is to have communication technology that's as accurate, reliable, rapid, safe as a cell phone. And that's not easy. I mean, it's like Thomas says, we have found so far, and especially Dr. Schwartz, he's been working on this for 25 years, lots of ways that don't work, or some ways that work a little bit, but not enough. So right now, he and his team of electrical engineers, software specialists, and evidential mediums, and we mentioned Mark Anthony, by the way, he's one of the mediums for the Soul Phone Project. They work together then to find the best approach. And our first goal is to have what's called the soul switch, where the post-material person, someone who's passed on, that's our favorite term, can touch or send their electromagnetic field or somehow interact with this switch to then signal a yes or no. It's a binary switch like the switches on a keyboard. Once we have that switch that's working near real time, I mean, we have had different switches, but they take too long or they're too sensitive, or they can register for things like the consciousness of the experimenters. But once we have the appropriate switch, then we are told by our electrical engineers it's a relatively simple task to then develop the soul keyboard assembly of, say, 40 switches, so that then we can text and type with our loved ones who have passed on, but also with post-material luminaries. There is an army of inventors, scientists, educators, religious teachers, others who stand ready. They want to help us heal our world, but they need a way to communicate clearly with sufficient quantity and quality. And that's what we call the A team. We work primarily with 30 of them. Most people would recognize the names Nikola Tesla and David Bohm and Albert Einstein and so on. But we're told for every one that we work with, because we only work with so many people, there are hundreds more waiting in the wings. So there's just so much hope right now. And that's part I want to share to people, because I know things seem dark and I lose hope, but really we're that close to a breakthrough. And the article I encourage people to read is article number 125, just called the 8 developments. And so these are 8 fairly recent developments, including the Soul Phone project, that put us on the precipice, as we were talking about beforehand. We truly can reach world peace in the next 10 years. And that's why I work with organizations like Humanity's Team that have a similar goal to reach that. So with the Soul Phone project, right now they're working on 3 different sensors. It's kind of like betting on 3 horses in a race. We don't know which one's going to win, but we feel quite confident that one will. So people have been following this for some time. Some of them get a little discouraged, like, are we ever going to have them? We're like, hey, if this was easy, somebody would have done it by now. But it's not easy, but we don't give up. And people who want to keep track of that can sign up for the newsletter at soulphone.org.
Wow. I have never heard of anything quite like this before. I love that you called these post-material luminaries. I did a video a long time ago about connecting and getting help. And one of the things I feel is that you have free will. And so in order for souls on the other side to work with you, you have to ask for the help. And I mentioned, if you're writing a book, you could ask William Shakespeare to help you, or, like just an inventor, you could ask, Nikola Tesla, et cetera. But I love this idea of going straight to the source, getting it right from their mouth, and being able to have like a real conversation, and the thought that that's an actual reality coming soon, not like an AI making this up, because that could be a possibility. But how is the communication verified? I'm guessing you're using Mark Anthony and other people who Dr. Schwartz has verified to be evidential. And actually, most people probably do not know his program and what he's done. But in a nutshell, he has vetted through, I will say, blinded, double-blinded studies that people have the ability to produce evidential information about a sitter, correct?
Yeah, it's an important question you're asking. How do we know it's really the soul involved and not an imposter? So we have a series of tests that we run, and one's called the personal identification test. So we found 10 questions, some which were very hard to find, little details about these people. And again, we ran some of the group that I mentioned, David Bohm, Bohm, genius colleague of Albert Einstein, um, and Nikola Tesla and others. And so we were using a plasma globe then for the yes, no. It took longer, like 20 minutes to get a good solid yes or no because of data analysis and so on. But they were 100% correct. And we mixed up these questions so that for Nikola Tesla, some of the questions the answer should be yes. Some of the questions the answer should be no. Like we'd asked if David Bohm's father's name was Nikola Tesla's father. Well, the answer should be no. So when we mixed up all these questions and asked them, and again, questions that are not widely known, and got 100% response time after time, then we felt quite certain that these post-material persons are indeed who the mediums told us were coming in. But neither Dr. Schwartz and I have any clear ability. So we say we're like the Helen Keller of spiritual research.
I love it.
Yeah, and it gets better than that. We're working, we have worked some with angels. We've been meeting recently on strategic planning and said, well, since angels have so much more energy, perhaps we ought to focus on measuring getting their yes or no. And then when we can quantify the communication with them, then get more information and make it easier to communicate with humans who have passed on. So, for example, I was doing some of the research with an angel called Sophia, and everything is standardized. I mean, Dr. Schwartz is a scientist. Everything has to be the same, controlled, double-blinded, multi-center studies, and so on. So I'm getting ready to read from the clipboard, as I did with all these other people, Okay, Sophia, thank you for being here today. And I looked over at the chair where she's supposed to be, but I can't see her, but I assume that she's there based on the results. And when I turned, all of a sudden I saw a beautiful woman with blonde hair first, and all these happened in a fraction of a second. And then a huge angel, her head was hitting the ceiling with wings, and then this swirl of colors and energy. And I was like, wow, did I just see an angel? And so later I reported that to Dr. Schwartz. He said, well, that's interesting. You're the third person who's described her that way, exactly the same.
Whoa.
Yeah, so stay tuned, people, and keep hope alive because there's really a lot of exciting things going on. And for those who are grieving or discouraged and so on, pitch in. When you help others, when you have a mission to work on, it's like Mission Impossible. Then you get engaged, you get involved in that life flow, and you become part of the solution instead of, why me, God?
Well, I love that you said that because I think there are a lot of people who kind of describe themselves like you did. I'm the Helen Keller of, these interpretations because my clairs aren't turned on and somebody who's watching, but you just said that the organization is an ORG. So it is, I'm going to guess it's some type of a charitable foundation or nonprofit.
Well, I directed the Soul Phone Foundation for 8 years, and we dissolved it early this year because our CPA and attorneys, it was their opinion that we were moving clearly toward a commercializable product or app. And at that point, the foundation couldn't support that. So right now we have private donors that are funding everything.
And that's exactly the point, is that some people who are watching, their clairs may not be turned on, but maybe they have money, maybe they have time, and there are ways that they can help and make a difference with this also.
Well, while we're on that topic, let me mention article number 119,
Okay.
and that is helping yourself, others, and our world. So this is a program actually I got from working with Helping Parents Heal, and I tell the whole story there. But between the 8 developments I mentioned, article number 125, and then this helps people realize how they can make a difference, do what they came here to. I mean, it's quite clear to me we each are eternal souls. We come here for special reasons. Again, what Native Americans call, we each have a giveaway. And when we share that, then another piece of the puzzle's in place. And when enough people do that, and I don't think it's going to take a lot, that's when the world comes into being. The other one I'm mentioning programs is the Greater Reality Healing Program. I have 130 articles, so I have to write down the numbers. The Greater Reality Healing Program, this is article number 82. So there's the article, there are 18 30-minute videos I created. Again, all this is free. And then we just started having meetings. We'll start with 2 a month and then later more. We had 75 at our first meeting 2 days ago. So there are the resources then for a higher energy path to journey from deeply grieving and struggling to brightly shining. And it's
Mm.
unlike any other, it's like helping parents heal, but for other people. People have had a spouse pass, a dear friend, a pet.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. So what you were describing in the evolution, I think, is called the tipping point, is it not? Where it takes a small percentage, and I don't remember if it's 15 or it's a small 12 or 15 percentage. There was a study that was done that when the collective agrees on one idea, it can flip the whole group. Are you aware of this?
Well, I use the 15%er number. That's from Michael Newton. He said,
Yeah, maybe that's where I got it. I couldn't find this anywhere.
yeah, he, based on all his cases and now those of his therapists, and I think they're up to 65,000 cases now. I've been in touch with his research director, that about 85% of the people on Earth embody beginner souls, or let's say beginner energies.
How much, what percentage did you say?
85.
Okay.
Yeah, and then about 12% intermediate and 2 or 3% advanced, which I'm sure you and I are.
Wink, wink.
And so if you add up the intermediate and the advanced percentage, that's 15%. So that's why I call the 15 percenters. Those are the ones we're primarily focused on because the beginner souls, they're focused on, what actor,
Materialism.
actress, who got divorced, who got married, all that versus focusing on who are we and why we came here. So if we can actually get even a percentage of the 15 percenters engaged, we're there. And the nice thing is we experience the heaven on earth, the peace now. In other words, every little increment we make, it's like, it's a relief. So it's its own best reward.
Oh my gosh. I am so glad that you were talking about this. I had an experience on the other side. So my experiences have been through 5-MeO DMT, so powerful psychedelic, but they have been more real than real. And very early on in those journeys, it's the only experience I had where I wasn't becoming my higher self or becoming the collective. I was with a being and I was in a place that I would call space. It didn't have stars or nebula or anything, but and I was being shown the earth. And what I was shown was that there were only about 25% of the souls who were what they considered awake. The rest of them were just having an experience. And so I love that you said that because that feels like a confirmation when you just said that to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe it. And that's one reason people suffer, the needlessly. Um, and this is one of the things that got Dr. Schwartz and I together. For years, I shared the model from Lynn McTaggart, who wrote the wonderful book
Yes. Oh my
Feeling.
gosh.
And she said that quantum physicists are in agreement that if you look at everything that's in our world, and we're talking about what's really fundamentally true, not just these earth suits, but energy, consciousness, light. So if everything that exists in our world were the size of Mount Everest, the portion the average human can perceive would be the size of a golf ball. And Dr. Schwartz had a similar model that he used, that if everything exists with the height of the Empire State Building, the portion the average human can perceive would be the height of a coat of paint, which isn't very high. And so,
Wow.
yeah, so it's like the average person looking through a tiny pinhole saying, oh, there's no God, life is cruel, it's a tragedy. If you can open it up just a little bit, and my article number 77 talks about centering practices, way to do that, glimpse more of the big picture of life, then people realize, this is this wonderful experience, like the James Taylor song, Isn't This a Lovely Ride?
Oh my goodness. I love a conversation like this. You have no idea. This feeds my soul so much. You are a wealth of knowledge, my friend, a wealth of knowledge. Oh my goodness. I feel like I have to go back and listen to this recording again. So with everything that you've experienced in your life and you've gotten to this place and you're involved in all of these things, for the people who are watching, what are some of the things that you would just say off the top of their head that they can do that would instantly improve their human experience without knowing them or knowing anything about them?
Yeah, the first thing is to read article number 19, which is called The Great News. And I already mentioned that Dr. Schwartz and I compiled 10 indications about how life is set up. Because as you know, Lori, a lot of us relied on religious teachings for understandings about life, death, and the afterlife. And a lot of it's just plain wrong. I mean, they were doing the best they could, a few thousand years ago. But now we have a lot of contemporary information about the true nature of reality. And again, it's all great news. There's no downside. So people are, I mean, I work with parents, for example, and they say, my child passed, and I have a question. Why is God punishing me? And I'm just like, oh my God.
There's so much to undo.
what kind of world do we live in where people can imagine that the creator and sustainer of all life, the fountain of love, peace, and joy, would punish someone from that way? And so, there's just so much ignorance, fear, superstition, misinformation. So I'd say start with the great news, article number 9. Also, my book, which is called Ask the Soul Doctor. I answered 171 of the most commonly asked questions. And um, because a lot of people have questions. And so for each one, I provide the evidence behind it and then holistic resources, solutions for challenges. So I'd start with those. And then the other things I mentioned, if people are having a tough time, come to the Greater Reality Healing meetings and read article number 82. If you feel like you're doing pretty well, but you want to make a difference, but you don't know what to do, read article number 21, which is called Identify Your Soul's Missions. And then I have an audio program where you go into deep relaxation and guided imagery to get in touch with your essence, your real self, your higher self. And remember, why did I come here? And then when you start doing that, even a little more, it makes such a big difference. So I'd say start with that. Yeah, review this recording, visit my website, and call me crazy, but I answer people's questions. Now, they're brief answers and they're very information packed, but I give my email address, mark@soulproof.com. And because I have all these resources and templates, so I can literally in 4 minutes give people so much information, read this, do this, let me know how you're doing in 60 days.
This is on such a small level compared to what you did, but you're giving me a massive confirmation. On the winter solstice of 2020, when I went to the other side, when I had this experience with Source, I was reminded that it was time to begin doing the work that I came here to do. And the next day I got a download that became an outline that I originally created as 63 videos called Uncover Your Soul's Purpose, What You Don't Know Is Holding You Back. One of the things that I figured out a very long time ago is the power of our thoughts. And I thought if I could just teach people, help people to change their thoughts in some way, then their life would improve, because I'd watched my sister struggle with depression and suicidal tendencies, and she'd call me and she'd be in this state and I'd see she's in a downward spiral, and I could help her analyze that and bring her back. And I would tell her, okay, change what you're saying to this, change what you're thinking to this, just replace it with this, and it would help. And she told me later that she had not committed suicide or attempted multiple times after conversations, and I had no idea. So I knew there was a power here. But what I soon realized, the very first video I released on my channel was about changing your thoughts, is that it wasn't as easy as I thought for the average person to change their thoughts. They had to change the perceptions. And you brought it up with that article where you said those things that we know. And one of them is that we picked it all. We picked our body, we picked what we would look like, we picked the strength or deficit that our body would have, where in the world we were born, what sign we were born, when the planets were aligned, and we picked our parents. And I'll tell you what, the number one pushback that I have gotten when guests have said this in the comments is there's no way I picked my parents, and there's no way that, I picked these things that are creating my life. They all feel that it's happening to them. So I would love you to just elaborate on that a little bit, because I feel like we're very kindred in what we kind of uncovered through however we uncovered it.
Yeah, well, first of all, people need to get more clear, or you could tell them the secrets of the universe in the perfect way, and they're not going to hear it. And so that's why we start with the healing, because the people have been deeply wounded, and so many people have been abused and prejudiced, and and then also people are taught fearful. I mean, some people go to fundamentalist churches and they're just taught such horrible things. The devil is tempting you at every
Oh my gosh, I see it in the
corner.
comments in some of these videos. It's nuts.
God's going to send you to hell if you don't believe this or do this. So they have all these things going on. So I recommend first to get more clear, and to do that, read article number 70, which is called Holistic Breathing Technique. And then the audio program is Holistic Breathing, 45 minutes of deep, noisy, diaphragmatic breathing. And that allows people then to scream, pound the mattress, cry their heart out, get rid of all this stuff, some of which is stuck in the muscles and soft tissue. And then they're like, okay, now they can see a little bit more, they can see a little hope, and then learn some of this information. But to your point about pre-birth planning, it's important to emphasize that not everything is planned and set in stone. Otherwise, that'd be determinism, and why bother with an earthly incarnation? But possibilities, potentialities are set up. So article number 25 talks about that. And Dr. Newton's research, Life Between Lives, is one of the best sources of information about this pre-birth planning. So there's no doubt in my mind, based on the clinical research, that that goes on, and people can have, in addition to the article, one of my audio programs is pre-birth planning technique. So people can get deeply relaxed and then recall the place of planning, of life planning, and then remember, why did they plan certain things, including tough times? And then once they remember that, then they can get with the program and start fulfilling some of their goals and missions. And then that's when life makes a lot more sense. And it frees up, of course, that stuck energy.
Wow. While you were talking, I feel like this super emotional wave that came over me, and I feel like crying. Mark, I have interviewed well over 300 people, and everybody I talk to has something that they're trying to do to help the collective. But I don't know that I've talked to somebody who has created so much and gives it away for free to help really, 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 really change the planet. And I feel this immense soul gratitude on the deepest level, like feel it, like I'm ready to start bawling right now. I am, I am so grateful for what you are doing, because I don't think most people understand what this work does and the ripple effect it has. And you have done more than most people that I've ever talked to.
Well, thank you. I can't take a lot of credit for it. Ram Dass said he's pretty much the mouthpiece for this, and I feel the same way. I have such a team, and I had, I think, 3 different psychics. People could see energy and auras. Um, when they would see me, they'd say about the same thing. They'd say, "Wow, you travel with an army." And I said, and the first time I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, well, most people have an angel or two, a guide or two. They said, you got like 100 people around you, 100 higher beings. So there's that. And then I've also been told by a couple different sources, and most recently when I had a Life Between Lives session, that I'm a different type of soul than generally comes to Earth, a teaching soul. One said a blueprinter, that I kind of go around the cosmos, and when there's an area that's ripe for a breakthrough, I come in and do what I can to help that come to fruition. So I'm just doing my job, and I got a lot of help.
I knew it. Like I knew it.
Yeah.
I thank you for telling us all of that, because it confirmed exactly why I felt the way I felt. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you've already shared a little bit about how people can find you, but I want you to do it again, because this is really important. Tell people the names of the websites. Tell us your email address again. Tell people how they can reach you.
Okay, so email address is Mark with a K at soulproof.com. My website is soulproof.com, and that is what has all the free articles, radio shows, newsletters, audio books, ebooks, audio programs, and the documentary film. And then soulphone.org is the website for the Soul Phone Project. And if you sign up for newsletters there, then you get a free monthly update on what's happening. And then you'll learn when, like right now, Dr. Schwartz is working on a paper for a scientific journal that proves without a doubt scientifically that life continues after bodily death. Well, people who are on the newsletter list then will get this and learn it's out. And then as soon as possible, and our goal is later this autumn to have them public demonstrations of the best current technology of the soul switch that then prove that indeed post-material people are answering yes or no.
Love it. I will put all of this in the show notes. I want to go through when I do the editing for this, and I want to pull out the articles that you named and try and put links in there for people, because I think that this is so important. I feel like I need to honor the work that you're doing and do my part and what I can to help share that with people so that it makes it easier for them to find it. At the end of my show, I say something all the time to people. I thank them for the work that they're doing to help wake up the collective because it's so needed. I feel like it's too small for me to say that to you. I don't know how to say thank you other than through my emotion of just saying, Mark, thank you.
Well, it's a sacred privilege. It's an honor. People, they thank me a lot. And they're like, how do you do this? And I say, it's what I'm here to do. I get more of it than anyone. So thank you again for what you're doing. Thank you again for what you're doing. Awesome.
Awesome. And of course, this show is nothing without all of you that tune in, watch, subscribe, support this channel. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for watching. Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.